and welcome to Viewpoint. I'm Rahim Rahmatullah. I'm joined today by Leonid Polyakov, a former Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister. Mr. Polyakov, many thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Rahim.
You joined us a few weeks before the anniversary of the signing of the Minsk II agreements. That was between Ukraine, Russia, militants in East Ukraine. Those agreements were supposed to bring an end to fighting in East Ukraine and to bring about an improvement in the situation. The deadline for much of the implementation was actually the end of December last year. We haven't seen that. What can you tell us about the current state of affairs with the Minsk agreements? Do you see that they will eventually be implemented?
Eventually, of course, there is no eternal process in this world, especially in diplomatic area. But this agreement, which is not exactly a legal agreement, it's more political agreement, is very specific because of the subject of the negotiation and events around. This is between Russia and current Russian regime, who still has difficulty to come to terms with Ukrainian independence, and Ukraine, which allowed at certain moment to become so weak and naive not to take Russian threat seriously. That is why we came to this situation when Russia invaded, occupied Crimea, started proxy war in Donbass. The first round, so-called Minsk I, let's call it this way, in September 2014, signified a deadlock between Russia not ready to move from proxy war. Actually, it was a war, but Russia at that time refused, and still refusing to recognize its de facto participation, but could not achieve its goal militarily at that point, because Ukraine managed to build resistance strong enough to stop advance of Russian troops and separatist detachments. So there was Minsk I, negotiation between Putin and Poroshenko with symbolic mediation from OSCE.
But it seems, I mean, since then, the situation hasn't actually changed fundamentally, has it?
Well, there was no radical change, but there are changes, and significant changes. The second round, you mentioned it almost a year ago, in February 2015, signified the end of another attempt of Russia to move further deep to Ukraine. It failed, and negotiators were stronger in terms of the impact. Now we saw Putin, Poroshenko, Merkel, Holland, and symbolic OSCE presence again. Now this time it's even stronger than before. Now we see United States not just behind the door, but this meeting of Nuland and Surkov signified de facto participation in the process of the United States.
Yes, two very high level
yes, which
officials.
Now gives a little bit more optimism than before.
Is that fundamentally what it hangs on? For example, I mean, does it take the US to step in and say, and put pressure on all sides in this conflict? Is that what is going to bring an end to it?
The potential is there. The issue which I started with, and it is still present, this psychological trauma of Russians still unable to accept Ukrainian independence, Ukrainian choice to move to Europe rather than to this so-called Russian world Putin so much wants Ukraine to go. I mentioned Putin, not just Russia or Kremlin regime, because he is the key player in this process.
And this is his personal vision.
And this is his, including his, first of all, personal vision, which to a significant extent reflects the dominant vision of Russian elite and Russian population still at this moment.
And what about Ukraine's role in this? Do they need to be doing more to make Russia and the rest of the world indeed understand that it is now an independent nation? I mean, we've seen, for example, the Ukrainian parliament passing the law of special status for Donbass. There were big protests in Ukraine about that. Do you believe that Kyiv has done everything it can to move this process forward?
Well, several issues you raised. First of all, about the role of Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine is playing the key role. When it all started in Crimea, it was very visible that Ukrainian potential partners and allies who could not accept this aggression were waiting for Ukraine to do something. And the message was very clear. If you start defending yourself, we are with you. But start to defend yourself. Slowly but steadily, Ukraine was building its resistance and stopped Russians, where it managed to stop. So the reverse process will certainly depend on how strong Ukraine will become.
But don't you think?
And the second issue, I think, is important. Sorry for interrupting you. It's a very general misinterpretation of the act you mentioned. Ukrainian parliament never adopted the act on special status. There are no special status yet, and I think there will not be any special status because it's Ukrainian territory. They adopted the act on special regime of administration. The only special status, so-called, we had and still have, is for Sevastopol and Crimean Autonomous Republic inside Ukraine. Nothing at all yet about Donbass. Just special regime of administration, temporarily, by the way.
It occurs to me that even if Ukraine does become stronger militarily, and it has, we've seen that over the last couple of years, taking on Russia in the military sphere is a mistake. They'll never win that war. Ukraine needs to be a little more creative in finding a solution to this conflict, because the military approach, it can't win that battle, surely.
Never say never, I would say. Of course, wise people soberly assess their chances, and it will be very unwise to plan victory over Russia militarily, of course. However, for the time being, Ukraine can and should build enough military force to make deterrence viable, to show Russia that further aggression will be too costly for Russia. This we can do and should do. It will be much easier if we have enough support from our partners with whom we want to build a united democratic Europe, free for all, and build a just and fair society together with all countries of the world. Russia offers not free, not fair society, but specific. They have specific democracy, specific economy, specific rule. We do not buy it. We don't want all these Russian specifics. We want to be universal, universally democratic, universally free. So And with this current regime in Kremlin, until these folks with Putin are in power, we don't see any chance to, for understanding with Russians.
Well, Mr. Polyakov, on that note, that is where we'll have to leave it because we are out of time. But I would like to thank you very much for coming in to speak with us. You've been watching Viewpoint. We've been joined by Leonid Polyakov, former Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister. That's all we have time for. Join us again next time.